Well, today is Easter Sunday. I think that makes it the 21st of April, 2019. Just filled up the Versys, and I've got 7,542 miles on it. And it was purchased approximately 2 years ago this month. I think it was the 15th, I think, was the day I brought it home, of 2017. And so, I started off just looking at KLRs, and I came very close to getting that. Was looking at the KLR and the DR 650. Those are the two that I was primarily looking at. When I ran across the spring ad for the 2017, that's the first year for this bike, Kawasaki Versys-X 300. It's a 296cc twin. It makes very close to the same amount of horsepower and torque as the KLR does, but it's at a significantly higher RPM. The bike's a little bit lighter than the KLR, so the power to weight ratio comes out almost spot on if you calculate it out. I'm 5'8", and so one of the things I'm just a little bit hesitant about the KLR, because it's a bit taller than I wanted, given that I've never owned any bike that I was going to take off the pavement before. And so with that in mind, I thought I should take a closer look at the Versys that I'm riding today. And I've been really happy with it. It's done everything I've wanted it to, which is allow me to get out and have some fun, ride back and forth to work when I choose to be out in the air instead of in a cage, and ride around with a few friends of mine. Most of the time it's keeping up with the KLR or vice versa. And let's see what I did there. Anyway, also ridden with a Suzuki DR 400, I think, DRZ 400. That's also a pretty nice little bike. Not quite as highway capable as this, but certainly more off-road capable. Meaning that you could actually ride that one off of a road, whereas the motto for the Versys is any road, anytime. And if you define road like I do, I'd say that's pretty accurate. If it's clearly it's going to do fine on the highway, you can fine-tune that by some of the accessories you put on and the tires you run. And it also does very well on Forest Service type roads, backcountry roads that are graveled. I've also had it out on a number of no longer maintained Forest Service roads and some logging roads, and even a few skid trails, and a couple actual trails. And the actual trails are a bit tough. It's just, it doesn't quite have the ground clearance or agility for that, but you could do it, I think, if you're a more experienced rider than I am. Anyway, I settled on this bike over the KLR simply because I wanted a slightly lower seat height, and I got to be honest, the idea of having fuel injection and a few more gauges was appealing to me, but that really wasn't what made or break the deal. The truth is, it's the inseam height that was the seller for me, that and the weight. So, 2 years down the road, this bike has served me very well. I've had one part fail on me, which is the neutral safety switch for the kickstand. Other than that, though, I've had zero bike-related issues. I had a couple of issues that were related to how the dealer set the bike up, and I think there's videos out there on those, and if not, I can bring those back up later. But they don't really affect the quality of the bike. That's a reflection of the dealership and their assembly skills. Let me just look here. Where shall we start? So, looking straight ahead of me at the dashboard, the dash is laid out so you've got a nice large tachometer, 24-hour clock if you want it, gear indicator, odometer with multiple functions. I have it set right now on instantaneous mile per gallon. It also calculates your average mile per gallon and distance to empty. I don't use those a lot because it's got a pretty big tank. It's got a 4.5 gallon tank, and when I do mental math just to see how much farther I've got, I use 60 miles to the gallon most of the time. If I'm really wanting to err on the side of caution, I use 50. But the truth is, my calculated average mile per gallon since owning this bike, so that's 2 years worth of riding, I believe my average is slightly over 62 miles per gallon. And that's calculated, that's not what it shows on the screen here. I think that the computer calculates it slightly higher than that. I'm not sure that the computer actually takes into account when you're not moving. Because I've calculated and compared it on some fairly short trips, and it seems reasonably accurate. At any rate, the distance to empty calculator on here, even though I don't use it a whole lot, is conservative, if anything. So if you pay attention to that, you should be able to be back to the fuel station well before you run out of fuel. Compared with most of the other bikes in this range, even the 650s, other than the KLR, this has a pretty large gas tank, 4.5 gallons. There is no off-road gear on this bike, and so I guess if I had to ding it, that's where I'd start getting, that's where I'd ding a few points. If you're intending to ride this bike off the road and place where there's going to be gravel flying up underneath, you're probably going to want to add some type of a skid plate, and Kawasaki doesn't make one, but there are a couple companies out there that do. I put a T-Rex Racing skid plate on here. It was very simple to install. I think it's about a 30-minute install, not counting the time to clean up the bike. And it's done a good job of protecting from minor scuffs and rocks flying up and hitting the exhaust, because the exhaust on this bike goes straight underneath the engine in an effort to keep the heat off the rider. Although sometimes when I'm riding in the cold, I kind of wish I had a little bit more of that heat. I guess the other minor gripes that I would have are I'm not a big fan of the factory tires, but given that it doesn't come with any armor at all on the bike, the 90-10 street, 90% road, 10% off-road tires that come with it are probably a reasonable tire for what Kawasaki's marketing the bike as. I would change them out, and did change them out pretty quickly with something a bit more aggressive. I ran through a set of Continental TKC80s on here, and I like those tires a lot. I'm now running Mitas EO7s, the EO7 Plus on the rear. I also like these tires. I haven't ridden them enough to decide whether, I'll run another set of these when they wear out, or if I'll go back to the TKC80 tire. Temperature gauge. It's not bad this time of year because it's pretty cool out. But in the summer, when you're running up back roads where your speeds are 30 miles an hour and less, the temperature will run up to, I think, 1 square below top deflection, which bugged me for a while. But the fact is, it runs all the way up to the top. Well, not all the way up to the top. It runs up to that, so there's 1 to 1.5 squares left. The fan comes on, it cools right back down to half deflection or less. So the bike seems to be working as designed. The temperature gauge just, you have a pretty broad range of operating temperature when you're running slower. On the highway, it's not a big deal at all. It pretty much always runs half deflection or less, even in the hot summer days. My personal preference would be that it didn't run up that high, but that is how the bike works. It doesn't seem to be an issue. Other riders have reported the same thing, and everyone I've talked to has not had any real issues with that either. So it was annoying at first. Now I'm used to it. Not a big deal. I changed the windshield. There's nothing wrong with the factory windscreen, but at my height, I was getting a fair amount of turbulence right where my camera sits on the side of my helmet, and I wanted to reduce that a little bit. As far as comfort, that wasn't an issue at all. It was purely a matter of trying to reduce the noise level a little bit. So I have the Madstad adjustable windscreen, and I think if I had it to do over again, I'd probably buy it a little bit shorter, maybe about to here, because I find I'd prefer to be able to adjust it down a little more rather than up. Very few times that I've actually ran this all the way up, but I did do it a couple of times when it was raining. That's a good upgrade, not required, and I don't know that that's really a minus. It just, if you happen to be the height that I am and mount your camera right where I am, it's not going to work out real well. Accessories for the bike from Kawasaki, crazy expensive, no surprise. That's the way it is when you have to buy stuff from the dealer, so hopefully there'll be aftermarket parts available. I know that the fog lamps, which the switch will eventually go right there, are $300 from Kawasaki. I have purchased a set of fog lamps off of Amazon, and I'll be mounting it to the engine guard when I have a spare minute. Don't ride late in the evening very often, but it's kind of nice to have it there just in case. But I think those are all total going to set me back maybe $75 and will probably be sufficient for the riding that I do. Kawasaki ones look pretty nice though. So hey, if you got $300 sitting around, why not go for it? Tell me how they work.
So to wrap things up, a couple of things I forgot to mention while I was out and about. The seat on this bike, in my opinion, it's worse than sitting on some old metal tractor seat. You are almost assuredly going to want to get a different seat. I replaced mine with the Seat Concepts foam and cover kit, and I've had good luck with that. I know there are some other options out there, some of which are do-it-yourself. There's videos on YouTube where people just cut some of the foam out and replaced it. But in my opinion, the seat's probably one of the first things you're going to want to change. Also, I want to mention that I have more than gotten my $300 worth out of the Kawasaki engine guards. I have unfortunately dropped this bike a few times, learning how to ride, and they have definitely saved me some money. So anyway, I think that's it for today, and I will catch y'all later.